This week on the WriterCon podcast,
stay with it. Stay with it.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich. Hey there, writers. Thanks for joining us. Well, we're about 2 weeks or so from the Oscars on March 2. And because of that, and because we have a showbiz guest on the podcast today, I've just got to point out, once again, 7 of the 10 nominees for Best Picture are adaptations of written work, which, get this, that's 70%. Obviously, that's actually slightly lower than the average, which is that about 75% of all pictures that have won Best Picture are based on something somebody wrote before. Lara, this is where I was getting to root. Which one are you rooting for?
Oh, gosh. It's a tough one. Probably The Brutalist. That was
based on a book.
Yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It really stuck with me. It wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to watch, but it was very well done. It's a beautiful film, and the acting was superb.
You're going to get to the whole it's 3.5 hours long part, or?
Well, it was a commitment, but it was told so well. I mean, did you really feel like it went on and on that long?
I felt like the time passed pretty quickly, actually.
And then at intermission, we got up and used the bathroom and got popcorn and went back for the next bit. So
life's good.
I thought it worked well.
Jesse, you got a favorite in this race?
Not in this one. I mean, I haven't been going to the movies as much lately, so I'm sort of really completely out.
Because you're reading those 1,000-page Brandon Sanderson books.
That's true. Yeah.
Honestly, I should point out, we haven't actually managed to watch every single one of the Best Picture nominees. So I'm basing it on the ones we've seen so far.
They haven't all come to Chateau yet, but they will.
I'm just rooting for whatever categories Wicked is nominated in. So that was delightful.
Oh,
so,
you like the musicals?
I did. Again, most of the time, musicals do not benefit from a movie because musical settings are usually sparse on purpose. But the world of Wicked actually does get added to by having the sort of money that a movie can throw at it. So
nice.
Interesting.
That's my thought on it.
Or they figured out how to do it. So what's the deal with all the adaptations? Can Hollywood not come up with ideas on its own? Why did they keep coming after the work of writers?
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper?
Well,
it's cheap. I bet you it's cheaper to pay someone to adapt a book to a story than it is to pay someone to write a full movie script themselves.
Probably. Plus,
And
you've already got so much of the hard work. Yeah, exactly. You have a built-in audience. The hard work is done for you. It's already, the character development should already be there. Surely if the books that they're picking up, I assume, are excellent stories, which is why they're reaching for those and thinking, I can make that into a film.
Well, I think having the books, it's hard to get a movie greenlit, I assume. That's what I hear.
Yes.
Although many of my books have been optioned, none have been made, so I believe it. But I think it gives the movie cred when, it's based on a book, particularly if it's a book that sold well, because then it's like proof of concept. Look, see that, people bought the book, so it must be a good story.
That's why it's funny that like a musical based on a book becomes a movie, because the book itself way different than the musical. Super weird. I've read those books too. They were enjoyable. They were enjoyable in a different way, but I'm like, this is not what the musical's about at all, and I'm okay with that. I found that to be funny. So
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I imagine Gregory Maguire, that's the author's name, is just swimming in a DuckTales coin bath, and it's just, being very happy with all that.
Well, for a while, his deal was doing kind of, updates and revamps of fairy tales. And then after the musical Wicked took off, then it became lots of sequels to Wicked. And I think now a prequel for Elphaba and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners, if you do read the Wicked book and its sequels about, spoiler alert, Elphaba's child, the book gets weird. Like, I mean, a really good job of exploring the world of Frank L. Baum and Oz, but Oz is a weird ass place. So some weird things.
Is this with Fiyero?
Yeah, spoiler alert, yes.
Like the scarecrow and the witch? That's so wrong.
I mean, I do believe they technically boned before he was Scarecrow. So, just technically. So,
okay.
From a technical standpoint. Listen, we're making this spicy as required.
Yeah. We're going for the big ratings this time.
Yes.
And speaking of, our interview today is with Lynette Bennett. I've had the pleasure of knowing the multi-talented Lynette for many years, so I couldn't be more excited about the fact that her first book is about to be released. It's a memoir of her early days on the Broadway stage. It's called Broadway Dreamer. And boy, does she know what she's talking about when it comes to theater. We'll talk about this in the interview. The first chapter deals with her on Broadway with Barbra Streisand in Funny Girl. And we hear about that. And we also talk about the writing, because she turned to writing later in her life after she still acts, but after a very successful career on the stage in New York. And then she started writing this memoir and other books, and 100% her. Make no mistake, she wrote it. No ghosts, no co-writers. This was by Lynette Bennett, the woman who played Lady Larkin in Once Upon a Mattress, one of my favorite musicals. But you're going to hear all about that later. First, the news. News story number one. Bookshop.org now sells eBooks. Longtime listeners may remember about 5 years or so ago when bookshop.org launched. The idea was to create an online presence for independent bookstores so that they could compete with some of the bigger chains. We won't mention any names, but you know what I'm talking about. And then the bookshop.org would share its sales revenue with bookstores. So your local bookstore recommends, here, get it here. And then they do, and they share the profits. So you're getting the book you want, but you're also supporting your bookstore. Well, that was physical books. Now Bookshop is expanding into the digital realm. Bookshop.org is going to create an online platform for ebooks. But after you buy the ebook, you can choose which local bookstore you want the money to go to. And according to their promotional materials, all the money, 100%, is then given to the local bookstore. So this is another attempt to allow independent bookstores to compete with big chains, both physical and online. It's really kind of extraordinary, but, I thought bookshop.org sounded like a dubious idea in the first place. According to their website, they've raised more than $35 million for local bookstores. Laura, explain this to me. I mean, getting an ebook sounds like exactly not why you go to a brick and mortar bookstore, right?
I cannot explain this. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that because, like you, I wasn't 100% sure that I thought this was really going to go anywhere when I first heard about it. But that is an amazing amount of money, and I am completely supportive of helping our smaller local bookstores for sure. So this is anything that's going to help them out and keep them open, I think is a great development.
Yeah, good. Jesse, what about you? You surprised or Not surprised.
I'm happy. I've been a big supporter of bookshop.org for quite some time because one, it was one of the few it was one of the few places you could buy an ebook where that money would then go to a local, like you tell it what local bookstore you want the money to go to. And just doing a little bit of research on the nonprofit that they set up and whatnot, like it seemed legit. It seemed legitimate enough. And so, I think I've bought a couple ebooks off there and went on supported some of the local stores here in town. And I'm happy that they're also getting into audiobooks. Again, that's one of the biggest growing segments of readership at least in America. And so I feel like this is positive, and I'm happy about it.
Good. Okay, news story number 2, cozy fantasy. An emerging genre like cozy mysteries, which are basically mysteries without any blood or overt violence. They're just Agatha Christie-like gentle mysteries. Well, now we've got cozy fantasy, which obviously is a reaction to romantasy or dark fantasy, both of which are sometimes more violent and sexually explicit. Well, now cozy fantasy has apparently arrived because it's got its own BISAC code. That's BISAC. Just in case somebody doesn't know what I'm talking about, when books are published, the publisher has to choose codes, the category, the genres that apply. This is used by the Library of Congress and libraries in general, and also sometimes by people searching for books online. Here's an interesting quote about it. I got this from a dark fantasy writer named Amron Gawani. Wrote, quote, "Ray, cozy fantasy. I do agree it's difficult to tackle contemporary issues in a realistic light because of how grim the world feels or is. In my latest project, I'm leaning more into chaos and absurdity to make the medicine more palatable. In some ways, the work is feeling lighter and darker at the same time." Laura, that quote, cozy fantasy, does this say more about readers' tastes or more about this world we live in? What do you think?
When we were experiencing the pandemic a few years ago, I noticed that my women's fiction that deals with weightier issues, social concerns, dipped, and that my supernatural suspense series was selling more. I think when we're facing a world that is a little bit scary and we are looking for an escape, a diversion from that, having something a little bit lighter to read is where we're going to seek our comfort. So I do think that makes some sense, that there's a little bit of a turn towards something cozier and a little bit lighter, although romantasy is still really big. I mean, there's
pretty dark,
plenty of escapism there too.
At least sometimes, right, though? Jesse, you read, I believe, some of the darker stuff. Is cozy fantasy a place where you would ever go?
Sure. It's like the Animal Crossing of books, right? And if you think about some of the great stories, like take Lord of the Rings, for example, like a third of that book is a cozy fantasy, right? Anything in the Shire or anything that involves food, right, is cozy. Like there's a part that is enjoyable in that. And like, I'm excited to see where this goes. I mean, I do think sort of stories need action and movement and plot. So I'm curious to see where does the conflict come in cozy fantasy? But if people can have cozy murder mystery, we can do cozy fantasy. So
I don't see why not.
Agreed.
All right, moving on. Today in Craft Corner, we have WriterCon friend and sponsor Desiree Duffy of Black Chateau and Books That Make You. Her topic, getting editorial book reviews, which can be challenging, but so important. So take it away, Desiree.
Craft Corner.
Let's talk about book reviews. There's 3 main types: editorial, author endorsements, and consumer reviews. For this episode of Craft Corner, we're going to dive into editorial, or Trade, industry-focused types of reviews. These are reviews that are written by professional critics for trade publications and industry-focused platforms. Examples include Publishers Weekly, Kirkus Reviews, Books That Make You Reviews, Library Journal, Edelweiss, and NetGalley. The purpose is what's key here. These types of reviews help you build credibility with booksellers, librarians, and the publishing industry as a whole. You'll generate pre-publication buzz and secure placement in libraries, bookstores, and in catalogs. How do you do this? Here's one of the tricks of editorial reviews. You need to submit those ARCs, your advanced reading copies, to trade publications at least 4 to 6 months before publication. You want to give the site enough time so that they can assign a book reviewer to it, so that book reviewer can read in full your manuscript, write the review, and submit it back to you. And you even want to give yourself just a little bit of time, just in case they find something that your editors and beta readers might have missed. That way you might have time to fix that plot hole before publication. Use platforms like NetGalley and Edelweiss to distribute ARCs to librarians, the booksellers, and the reviewers. Even on NetGalley, I know there's lots of book bloggers, media people, journalists. So this really can get the book out there and in front of people far in advance of the book's actual launch. I do encourage you to research all of the different submission guidelines for publication. For example, Kirkus has different publications guidelines than Library Journal does. And if you wait too long, you might even have to pay more money for an expedited Kirkus review. And let's face it, we all want to save a little bit of money and give everybody enough time in your book launch process. Strong editorial book reviews have a lot of benefits. They can lead to bulk orders from librarians and retailers. These bookstore buyers and librarians, they're often looking for the books that they're going to stock on their shelves many months, even up to 8, 9, 10 months, up to a year in advance. Editorial reviews can be quoted in your press release. Backgrounders that is submitted to a lot of the industry folks, your marketing materials. You can use it as A+ content on Amazon. There's actually a space for editorial reviews on Amazon. You can use these in your blurb or the back of the book copy. It really helps get the word out to the front line. Think of it this way. Editorial type reviews are the vanguard. This is very much a B2B, a business-to-business marketing and book launch strategy. Thank you to William Bernhardt and the entire team for making me a part of this craft corner.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Now, let's talk to Lynette Bennett. Lynette Bennett, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
It is a great treat to have someone you've known for a while and has been working on a book for a while, and now it's finally going to happen. So this is a real pleasure. Traditional first question, though, if you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Stay with it. Stay with it.
Well, you are the testament to perseverance, aren't you?
Yes.
We'll get into that a little bit.
I had 2 agents offer me a contract, and I thought, well, an agent then has to find a publisher.
Right.
So if I could, I'd rather go right with a publisher. So that's, what I was hoping for. And then Bill Bernhardt, this guy showed up who's very gifted. And I've done several workshops with Bill. And it's just such a treat to work with him. So now Bill's my publisher, and I'm thrilled.
Well, thank you. Do you mind talking about, because you had, speaking of perseverance, you weathered a couple of previous publishers
Yes.
Including one that later ended up in prison. Do you
That's
mind talking about that at all?
I have good taste. Let's face it. Well, the first one, and I was suspicious when he put out a newsletter claiming how Christian he was. And when people claim that too much, then that's suspicious.
That's a red flag.
Yeah, it's a red flag. And sure enough, he and his son went to prison for not paying people. I had another friend who was with him, and he said he didn't have enough in royalties. He had several books with this guy, and he said, I don't have enough in royalties to buy myself a sandwich. Well, that's not very good.
No. I read, I'm sorry, we will move on, I promise, but I read that there were more complaints to the Better Business Bureau about that publishing house before it folded because the principals were in prison than any other business. And I'm thinking,
really?
A publishing house?
Yes.
They are doing something wrong.
Yes, they were.
And then you had a second false start, but never mind. That book's coming out now.
She just never did anything, having promised me she'd publish the book.
Right.
She didn't happen to publish the book.
Well,
go ahead. Don't know if you want to spend any more time on that. But I had lunch with a friend of mine who turned out to be her copy editor. And she said, she can't afford your book. She does children's books and leaflets and things like that. There's no way she can publish your book. And she had owed this woman a lot of money.
Oh.
So.
Well, we're going to get that thing out because it's a terrific,
thank you, Bill.
Wonderful memoir. And I don't just say that just because I know you or because I love Broadway. It's just a wonderful book. What take us to the real beginning, though? How'd you get interested in writing a book? Because obviously you've been working as an actress for many years and now you're writing. How did that happen?
Well, I really don't know. My brother is a wonderful writer. And so, I mean, he gave me some clues about things. If I would write something, I'd show it to him and he would critique it for me. And I loved writing. I found out it was really fun. So, it was my next favorite thing to performing. I just really loved it. So that just got me started.
And did you still love it even after you were actually doing it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Loving it and writing it.
Well, tell us a little bit about Broadway Dreamer.
Well, where to start?
At the beginning.
Okay. I studied dance from the time I was little bitty, like 6. Mm-hmm.
And that's in Oklahoma, right? In Tulsa?
Excuse me.
And that's in Tulsa, where you
Yes, I grew up in Tulsa. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My mother taught piano and speech. So I played the piano from the time I was little bitty as well. And mother had us, I have an older brother, and she had us speaking from the very beginning. They called those little pieces readings. And so mother had us doing readings from the time we were little bitty kids. And that's wonderful for an actor. If you're comfortable being in front of an audience, and mother had recitals. So if you're comfortable in front of an audience, that goes a long way toward giving you a career. Because
so you left Tulsa eventually and went to New York, right?
Yes.
So you're already past most people because you've actually made the plunge and committed.
I graduated from the University of Tulsa, BA in English Lit, and went to New York to audition for Broadway. Mm-hmm. So, that first summer, though, I worked at St. Louis Municipal Opera, and that's a wonderful summer stock company. And, excuse me. So I had experience. They would bring in the stars who had played the roles on Broadway. And, there were just lots of marvelous people that I could talk to. I interviewed these people. I didn't let them go by. I stopped them and I interviewed them. And I learned a lot just speaking about the business,
I bet so.
So that was great.
Okay. And pretty soon you're being cast in shows. For instance, in chapter 1, you talk about being in Funny Girl, original production with the original actress, who, of course, is Barbara Streisand, almost immediately kind of superstar status. What was it like working with her?
Oh, she was wonderful. She was lovely to me. I was a replacement in the show. And the final night, she invited me to her dressing room. And she gave me her second album, which was entitled People. And we just had a lovely visit. She just couldn't have been kinder. So I can't say enough good about Barbara Streisand.
You also knew Barry Manilow quite well back then. How did you meet him? This was before he became the well-known name that he is now, right?
Yeah. He was my pianist and musical director. And Barry was terrific. He was so much fun. And he's very kind. He just gave $10,000 to a music teacher in Tulsa because he saw that the kids were using broken instruments. He's been here several times. And so I was able to have a chat with him, and that was really fun.
It's nice.
How did you happen to meet him back all those years ago?
I remember another friend recommended Barry to me.
Okay.
And I was wanting to make a demo record. A musical director friend had said, "Oh, you've got to make a demo record." So I said, "Well, how do I do that? And who pays for it?" He said, "You do, honey, but it's not that bad." So honey took the bait. And so he selected the songs for me. He was my musical director. And so we did three songs on the demo. And the first time, one of the things we did was a bossa nova, Laia Ladaya, Brazil 66. I don't know if you remember their albums, but
I know what bossa nova is, so go ahead.
So anyway, one was But Beautiful, if you remember that lovely ballad. That was a favorite of mine. And one, the Donovan singer and writer, he's a Scotsman. And so he had a song called Where Your Love Like Heaven, which is a strange title, but it's a very pretty song. And Barry knew I'd love it, which I did. And we overdubbed it, which I thought would be fun. And it was. So Barry wrote, so we did the basic recording, and then Barry wrote out 3 additional vocal lines for me to use.
Wow.
And so then we just overdubbed it, 3 more times.
You were your own backup singer.
Excuse me?
You were your own backup singer.
Yes, exactly. Very good point.
When I was reading the book, I was surprised, but also delighted. You talk about meeting a very young Meryl Streep and working in a show. Meryl Streep.
Oh, yes.
And
we studied with the same voice teacher. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and you were also in a show with John Travolta's sister, I think. And you talk about him kind of showing up at some of the rehearsals. So you were meeting a lot of people back then. What did you think? Could you tell back then that they were going to be incredible actors? One doesn't know that, Ellen Travolta has done quite a few things, and she's really fun. They were a showbiz family. Their mother was a director, and so they both have said, John Travolta and Ellen Travolta, that their mother had them overacting, so they had to learn not to act.
That's great.
So it was a showbiz family. There were 5 kids, and they were a lovely family.
And you and Meryl Streep had the same vocal coach. Did I hear that right?
Yes. Our teacher, a coach works on material with you. A teacher teaches you how to sing, how to produce a tone. Okay, so this was our teacher, Estelle Liebling, and she was quite famous in New York. She's published books for coloratura sopranos, which I am, and she would have material, especially in coloratura work. You do a lot of cadenzas, and so Miss Liebling would write the cadenzas, which were fabulous. So I just loved studying with her. I couldn't believe it. I was just in heaven when I walked into her studio.
So this was music, vocal, like singing, right? Not somewhere Meryl Streep must have learned apparently every accent known to man, but that wasn't here, right?
No, this was music. But she and I waited for our lessons, and so we had a nice chat each time we'd be waiting, you know. Fun.
And while we're name checking people, some of our viewers may have noticed that there's a picture hovering over my head, and that's you on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, right?
Yes. Yes.
How did that come about?
Oh my goodness! I don't know if you remember the group for girls, the Campfire Girls. And I'm afraid they're fading out a little bit, but it was a wonderful group for girls. The Supreme Court took care of that for us because they said we had to have boys. You know, there are Boy Scouts and then there are Girl Scouts. So they tried having Campfire boys and girls. And I think that just didn't work. You know, it wasn't a boys program. It was a girls program. And it was based on Indian lore. So that's why I'm wearing the Indian.
That is why everybody, it looks like, is in some kind of probably wouldn't be approved of today headdress or something like that, right?
Well, the first thing I did when I went on to the show was award Johnny with a pair of Indian feathers to wear, a headband, and the Indian feathers sticking up at the back of his head. So that got a good laugh itself, and he could use that and make something of it, you know.
Well, the thing I noticed looking at this photograph, and we have others as well, but everybody's smiling. They're loving having you on the show.
We had a lot of fun. It really worked out so well. And on the subway that morning, this was a gift. I was looking over a guy's shoulder at on the New York Post, and there was a story about Sinatra proposing to Juliet Prowse, and the headline said something about Sinatra proposing to his Juliet, you know. And so, and she said, crazy. And so when we were on the show, I was lashing. You know what lashing is? Rope lashing. And I was going to do Johnny's legs, but he said, well, let's do legs. Let's do Ed's legs. And so, which was a good thing to do. And so when he suggested that, let's do Ed's legs. And I said, crazy. And that got a big laugh. He could do his Jack Benny look to the audience.
Right.
You know, and so he loved me after that.
Oh, wonderful. You were also in, remind me, I think it's a musical version of The Yearling. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you were maybe toured in Once Upon a Mattress?
Yes. With Imogene Coca.
And you played Lady Larkin.
Yes.
And I've told you this before, and it doesn't relate to your book, but
tell me again.
I did the same play when I was in the 8th grade.
Oh, I do remember. And you were Sir Harry.
I was Sir Harry, and you're Lady Larkin, so we're practically a couple, you see.
That's right. Oh, exactly. We're a pair. Yes.
That's right. We sing the same love songs, just at different times.
That's right. And it was a beautiful song. Mary Rogers, Richard Rogers' daughter, was the composer.
Now we're really digressing, but she did her memoir, or whatever you want to call it, last year, called Shy, obviously a reference to Mattress. And I thought that was really a trip. But let's get back to your book. One of the nicest things about this book, you know, of course, we're talking about all your shows and the singing and dancing and acting and appearances, but the centerpiece of the book, at least in my mind, is your relationship with your now husband, Warren, who, like I said, you're still married to after how many years?
54.
54. Holy smokes. Tell us that story. How did you two get together?
Oh, my goodness. Warren had been traveling for 6 months. He'd been a missionary in Brazil. He speaks Portuguese. So when he finished his responsibilities in Brazil, he traveled for 6 months around the world. And this was his first day back in the country. And he didn't want to go out. He didn't want to do anything. He was just exhausted. But he had been at this church, Christchurch Methodist United Methodist on Park Avenue and 60th. He'd been the youth director before, while he was in seminary. Those 3 seminary years, he was the youth director. And by that time, I had joined the church. I was singing in the choir. So I was really involved with the church. I grew up at Boston Avenue United Methodist here in Tulsa. And so I'm from a devout Christian family. And so I was there and I was joining the young adult group, and they went to lunch on summer Sundays. Well, this was the summer Sunday. And so they meet in the courtyard of the church and then walk to a neighborhood restaurant. And so I came out of the choir and he saw me recessing, down the aisle to the hymn. And I saw him just coming out of church, walking to an exit. And I said, wow, who is that? I've never seen him before. And so we both were in the courtyard, and then we went to a restaurant, and this was just marvelous. Everybody sat down, and I realized they were sitting down at the table, but I thought, I have a rehearsal penciled in with Barry Manilow. We were working on this demo record. And so I thought, well, I can't sit down till I've called him to say, are we on or off? And I want us to be on. I want us to be off with Barry so I could meet this new guy. So I went to the front of the restaurant, made the phone call, came back to the table, and the only empty chair was next to this new guy.
Oh,
well, what could I do? I had
this
to
was
sit
meant
someplace.
to be.
And so I sat down and I said, may I join you?
After standing up Barry Manilow, right?
After standing up Barry Manilow.
Called to cancel with him. That's fabulous.
So that's how it started.
Fantastic.
And we say now that we made the deal over lunch. We had so much fun talking. We just laughed. I was just giddy. Mm-hmm. And Warren was just back in the country. He was exhausted. He didn't even want to come to church that day. But fortunately, he did.
Yeah, I bet he's glad he did.
Well, what does a typical writing day look like for you? Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Oh, that's a good idea. I get done what has to get done. And for instance, I get dressed in case the doorbell rings, So I'm ready to go to the door. And then I go to the computer and I figure out what it is I need to work on that day.
All right.
So, but I have a specific, goal to make that day. So, yeah, and I just love it.
And you're working on another book too. Well, you're working on several
It's
books.
A trilogy.
Which do you think is going to be next?
Oh, London.
Mm-hmm. So volume 2 of your memoir.
Yeah, I'm taking it chronologically.
Because after you left New York, you and Warren, now married, I think, went to London, right?
Went to London, yes.
Yeah, and you continued with your fabulous showbiz success there.
Yeah. And have you been to the show Chateau, the musical Chateau? It's a wonderful musical.
I have seen it, yes.
Yeah, so I was in that in London.
Oh.
So that was fun.
No doubt.
So I can't wait to read about that.
Fortunately for me, my pianist from New York, Richard, was able to give me some background on Chicago because, as I said, I'm a coloratura soprano. So he said they're having auditions. Candor and Ebb, the writers, are having auditions for Chicago. And he said, I think you should go. And I said, oh, good. Will you play for me? He said, yeah, sure, as always. So I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, well, this character, she's a reporter. And she relates to, I forget the leading, Roxy Hart. And that's a true story. It was a movie with Ginger Rogers. And so I said, okay, what's the deal with the reporter? Her name is Mary Sunshine. And her song is, there's a little bit of good in everyone.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun. And it was nice and high. And so we went to the audition, and they talked to me afterward, which is good. If they're not interested in you, they don't talk to you.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I shouldn't have said thank you because they were interested. Thank you means you didn't get the job. So they did not say thank you.
Wow. Sweet.
So you don't want to hear thank you when you go to a Broadway or an East End. East End is what they call their Broadway. It's a neighborhood, just like Broadway's a neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Go ahead.
So then I got a call and they wanted me to come back. So that's good. You have a callback. That's called a callback. And so Richard and I went again. And but he was able to give me the background from the Broadway situation. And that is it was written for a woman. I mean, it's a high soprano. It's written for a woman, Mary Sunshine. And this man came to the audition and sang, and they thought, good grief. They fell in love with his voice. And they said, that guy could do Mary Sunshine. And the other partner said, well, what do you mean then? What are we going to do about the soprano voice? And he said, well, he'll just sing it. He'll sing it in his voice. And so that is what they did. And the understudy, though, they couldn't find anybody else with that type of voice, any other man with that type of voice. And so the understudy was a woman. So that's what Richard was talking about. I would be auditioning for the understudy, the coloratura role. So we went and they offered me the job. Now,
what a deal.
Nice.
Crazily, it meant, when we do out of town tryouts in New York, we go to a nearby place, New Haven, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, a nearby place to New York. Well, they were going way up north, and I'd be away from Warren and the church for 6 weeks, and I didn't want to do that. So I said, come talk to me when you get back to town, and I would love to do the understudy. Okay, crazy? Well, yes. But anyway, that's what I did. So
sweet.
When they got back to town, they called me and they said, this girl's leaving the understudy, and will you come and do it? And I said, well, yes, I think I will.
Nice.
And so I did. And I had a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And then when the man left permanently, then I played the role permanently. So that was really wonderful. What an opportunity.
We're running out of time, but
Okay.
I don't want to wrap this up, Lynette, until you've had a chance. Would you indulge us and tell the story of your, I think possibly the world's only shoeless tap dance?
Yes. Oh my. So I had a really fast change as this is Funny Girl now. As my Funny Girl character, I had a really fast change. And I had a dresser to help me because I never could have done that by myself. So I had on a discard costume of Barbara's. It was so horrible she wouldn't wear it. And I inherited it. It was a tap shorts outfit, one-piece outfit. And the bottom part, the shorts, were a maroon color. And the top was pink with maroon trim. Okay. So, and I was underdressed in green tights because the next thing was a tap dance. And I went right in to being the lead dancer in the tap dance. And so Alice, my dresser, helped me get out of it. So I'm in this horrible tap shorts outfit, and I tap over to Alice in the side. That was a duet. Okay. So I tap over to Alice, and I'm underdressed. So I scrunch down the maroon tights, and of course the boots are high topped. So I managed to kick off the maroon tap shoes. I pull on the high topped green boots for the military number, zip up the boots. Alice has my jacket, slip my arms in, scrunch the jacket down on Velcro. She hands me my military hat. I pin it in as I run all the way around. This is a very wide stage. I run all the way around the back of the stage. When I get over to the other side, then two boys come tap. We were boys and girls then. Right. Two dancing boys, boy dancers, come tapping over to me, and I tap back out with them. We're a trio now. So Saturday matinee, the house is packed. So I'm underdressed, maroon on top of green tights. Okay, so I tap over my duet, and on the other side, here's Alice, and I pull down the maroon tights. I have on the green tights. Only I didn't tell that right. I have on the green tights. I put my arms out. Oh, and zip up the high top green boots. Put my arms out. Alice has my jacket. Push the Velcro down. Grab the hat, officer's hat. Run around the whole back of the stage to the other side of the stage. I look down, and for the military tap, in which I must have green tights and I've got high top green boots, I look down and I have maroon legs into green boots. Okay. So there's nothing to do. So the stage manager is standing there giving light cues. And he said, "You can't change. No time. Go on like that." But I just couldn't. I unzipped each boot and kicked it off. Unzipped each boot, kicked it off. Here come the two boys. And we three have to go out tapping. And I'm out there dancing away. And I have maroon tights with a green costume with two boys in green. So
and no shoes.
Only shoeless tap dance that's ever been done in Broadway history.
That's a great story. The book is called Broadway Dreamer. Lynette, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Good. See you soon. Just a few parting words. You've heard me say this before, but the WriterCon cruise is coming up at the end of May and the retreats after that. And the conference is Labor Day weekend. So go to writercon.com and you can read all about that. Instead of doing that, let me remind you that WriterCon has its own newsletter. And you don't want to miss the next issue, which I know for a fact is coming out next Sunday. And it will have wonderful articles and news about new agents and new publishers accepting whatnot. And there's also a magazine which comes out every quarter. That's a fee, but the newsletter is completely free. So go to Substack and search for WriterCon and sign up. And by the way, if you haven't joined the WriterCon Facebook group yet, you really need to do that. We not only circulate the news before anybody else has got it, we have some really fun, engaging conversations. So join it. And if you're enjoying this podcast, hey, subscribe and then like us or rate us or review us wherever it is you get podcasts, from Apple or Google Play or whatever it is. It does help new listeners find us, and we always like that. All right? Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.